everyone, I'm Margaret Ford. Well, what is right and what is wrong in the state of Texas? And how can those problems be fixed? Well, joining us today to discuss the issues is the Honorable Mark W. White, Governor of Texas from 1983 till 1987. Thank you very much for joining us, Governor White.
Thank you very much, Margaret. I'm delighted to be with you.
Thank you. What do you see as some of the major problems in the state of Texas?
Well, I think once again we see that education is in the forefront of the problems that we face. We worked for a long time back in 1983 and 84 to bring about education reform in Texas, but we were working primarily on how we improve the quality of education that was going to be delivered to the young people. Today we see that the question of financing of that education is in the forefront. Even though we put more money into education back then, we didn't complete the job, and today, because of a failure to better equalize the revenues that are flowing into the poorer school districts, we're faced with now having to go back and start a new program from the beginning. That's going to be a major problem that we face over the next few months. How
do you think that problem should be resolved?
Well, I guess really the basic answer to it is really almost too simple to believe. I would like to see every school in Texas be such that you wouldn't mind your children going there, or I wouldn't mind my children going there. And once we pretty much meet that test, then I would guess that we have done the job that we ought to do for our children. And that takes money.
You're absolutely right. And there are some individuals who are very concerned about that aspect of it, additional money. They're saying that the taxes will go up and so forth. What kind of assurance do those individuals need to recognize that this is something that must be done for the state of Texas and for all school children?
Well, I think they ought to go over to the penitentiary and see how they like it that way and how much it costs to do it that way. Because if you'll look at the content in that prison system of ours today that's filled to overflowing, you'll find many of the problems that are reflected in that prison started way back yonder when we didn't teach a kid how to read and write. We didn't care enough or think enough about that individual to make certain that they were going to be able to have the tools to be productive in society. Many of them dropped out of high school, never completed maybe the 8th or 9th grade. You're not going to get a good job at that level. You're going to go find something else to do, and many times you wind up being in trouble. You don't have the alternatives. We're not here tonight or this afternoon to excuse the crime. I think we have to be firm and just in the way in which we administer punishment for crimes. But let's don't be foolish about it. Look at it this way. The guy that works at IBM almost never robs the 7-Eleven. Good jobs, a good future. People want those things for themselves, and I think to the degree that education gives that to young people, then we can divert a lot of this from a criminal effort that we have to expend huge sums of money on.
I was amazed when I was reading about the Edgewood versus Kirby case, and there were some references made to obsolete textbooks, antiquated equipment in the labs and so forth, no computers in some of the schools. So if we are expecting those children to compete in a modern-day society, then certainly they need to be equipped with all of those.
And if you think it was bad then, you ought to have seen the way it was before. When I took office, it was just unbelievable. We enhanced the funding for Edgewood dramatically when I was governor, yet those enhancements were not enough to make up the disparity between what was being spent on other students around the state. I would like to see, and I think we're going to see, a time when I wouldn't mind my little first grader going off to school at Edgewood Independent School District. One nice thing that happened there, the test scores at Edgewood went straight up right after the educational reform programs of 1984. When we started focusing on childhood development, early instruction in English, we have 4-year-old programs where young, primarily Spanish-speaking children are brought in, taught English, so that when they go to class on the first day, they'll understand the language. You know, can you imagine how horrible it is for a little child? And I remember I was frightened the first day I went to kindergarten, new beginnings. Even though my mother was a first grade teacher, it wasn't the first grade in that school. And so to come in without understanding a thing the teacher says and try to be a success under those burdens is just enormous for a young child. And then add a lot of complications to it. that make it even more difficult, with the parents maybe having to move 2 or 3 times each year. Mom or dad are maybe not living together, maybe not being able to get a good job, and that torments that little child. So how do you raise that child into an atmosphere that will be stable, where it'll be secure, kind of wrap them with a little love, and then I think you're going to get a better product. And the teachers are there, but they can't do it all by themselves.
So obviously, Governor White, you think that the Texas Supreme Court made the right decision.
Listen,
right?
that court was filled with liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, but one thing I think we have on that court, they're good lawyers, they're good judges. I don't criticize the decision. I think it's a decision that's long overdue. We need to get this problem solved. When we're willing to spend bonded dollars of $1.8 billion for prisons for 2 years, just for 2 years we're spending that on running our prison system, surely we can find a similar amount of money or whatever it takes to do the quality job that will get kids off to a good start.
Let's talk just a bit about open enrollment. We see that there will be some changes in terms of equity funding in education for all children in the state of Texas. Do you think that open enrollment is a good idea? Do you support that?
Well, I think what we have to do is look at it from the child's point of view. What's best for the child? What you're doing there is you're saying maybe the parents can choose a better school for their child than the people who are in charge of the school district. I'm not too sure that parents are in a position to take time off and make a thorough search for which is the best school here for my child. We have a hard enough time getting many of the parents to come to PTA meetings. Now, how valid will that search be and how beneficial will it be for the child? Many times the parents may not have gone to school long enough to know whether the school is a good one or a bad one. I mean, I really have some real concerns about it. It sounds good, though. You know, well, I want my child to go to the very finest school in Texas. Well, where is it? Well, it's in some other county, you know. Well, now how are we going to get the child over there? Well, let's just stop that. Let's go back and do what I suggested to begin with. Let's make certain all the schools are good. You know, what's wrong with doing it that way? We're paying for them. Mm-hmm. Why shouldn't we? And really, this whole school system that we have around Texas is built one school at a time, one neighborhood at a time. And let's go back and do what we should have done 50 years ago, before all the desegregation battles. We weren't doing what was right for kids that lived in black communities going to black schools. And anybody that doesn't believe that doesn't know the difference between light and dark, day and night. It was true.
Specifically, what were some of those things? And of course, I know. I mean, my goodness, I went to school in the South.
Yeah.
So,
I was a beneficiary of a very good school system, but there were a lot of kids who happened to have a different color skin that weren't able to have a good education. Mm-hmm. Today, we have an understanding of what the law is and responsibilities, and that is that everybody should have an equal opportunity to an education. Well, let's go back and build good schools, and let's go back into the neighborhoods. Let's quit destroying these neighborhoods. Right now, you see it's almost an annual thing, and the neighborhoods tend to deteriorate, the schools go down, the families, break, the jobs aren't there. Let's go back and build pride in these neighborhoods. There's no reason to think that a school can't be a good school. Put good teachers in that school, you have a pretty good school. You start putting good programs in that school, you have a pretty good school. People want to go there. Be proud of it.
What do you think about the quality of education now as a result of House Bill 72, for example, that indicated no pass, no play? There has been an emphasis placed upon students getting a quality education, taking the basics and so forth.
Well, I think House Bill 72, as difficult as it was, and I know it wasn't perfect, and I found out later that it wasn't perfect from talking to school teachers and watching the election returns. There were people that were extremely upset by some of the impacts. But yet I think on long review, House Bill 72 was a first step in the right direction of saying that we've got to have standards, we've got to raise the qualifications for passing through these grades and not let a kid move from one grade to the next just because he got older, and make certain that they're really learning something. Now we can discover if they learned something in the first grade. Before House Bill 72, sometimes you wouldn't know that they hadn't learned anything until they got to the 9th grade. Or maybe when they went to graduate, or even worse, when they went to get a job and were told, you can't do this work because you don't know how to read. That's gone now. Now we have some people that are unable to do the work for whatever reason, but they get a certificate of completion, not a diploma. And that's fair. We've got to make certain that the diploma means something. We've got a lot more work to do. We're not anywhere close to where we need to be when you compete with people in Germany or Japan or other countries around the world.
Okay, as we look at education and some of the changes that are occurring in education, specifically with House Bill 72 and some of the changes that occurred there, and we think about some of the problems that are occurring in various communities, we know that drugs and drug use and abuse, that is on the increase or the incline in this city and in this state. So when you have young children who are abusing drugs, using drugs and abusing drugs, those minds might be a little bit difficult to educate. So how do you grapple with that?
Well, you're right about that, Margaret. This thing is not just confined to one neighborhood. It's in the rich schools, it's in the poor schools, poor parts of town, rich part of town. It's in the black, white, brown. It's across the spectrum in differing levels and differing intensities, but still destructive. Destructive of the individual life, destructive of the economy. It changes the way in which people react as far as crime's concerned. People will get hooked on crack. They'll break in, rob, steal, anything just to satisfy their need for that. And that's a major part of the crime increase that we see and the violence that we see in our society. What do you do about it? I think you have to have a broad spectrum of an assault on this problem. I like what President Bush is saying. I think that what he's saying is appropriate. I don't think that he's putting sufficient resources in place. I think there needs to be much more law enforcement up front. Many of these people are deterred not by long prison sentences, but by blue uniform with a gun on their hip in the neighborhood who's there on a regular basis and can observe wrongdoing and really be a preventive measure. Give protection to the neighborhood, to the law-abiding citizen. Go through our neighborhoods today. In the wealthier part of towns, you see sophisticated security systems. In the poorer part of town, you see burglar bars. And it's awful to think that we have to, in a sense, the biggest prison we have is our home at night. We lock ourselves in. And that's awful. I can remember growing up over here on Kipling Street, which is now in the center of town. It used to be on the edge of town. We never locked our doors.
I remember those days as well. You're absolutely right.
We do now.
Well, you know, there has been an attempt within the city of Houston to try to do something about battling that drug problem. And it seems as though there is a bit of success in that area. But there are some individuals in the various communities who are becoming just a little bit discouraged, and they're saying that we may be fighting this battle now a little bit too late.
Yep.
Perhaps it's gotten out of control. Do you agree with that?
Margaret, I asked the federal government back when I was Attorney General back in 1979 if they would start building a stronger perimeter around our nation to protect us from the dope that's being smuggled in. I asked for radar surveillance along the border to keep the airplanes out that were smuggling in. You just saw this past week a huge bust, the biggest in the history of the country, of narcotics, much of which probably came through El Paso. We have the resources to do the job. And if you mean to tell me we spend $1 trillion on defense and we can't stop a DC-3 loaded with marijuana or a truck loaded with cocaine, then we're spending our money in the wrong place. I think we can. I think we need the willingness to do it. We need the determination to do it. That'll be one phase of it. The other phase is frontline protection, neighborhoods. You also have the business of how do you educate young people.
Of course, that's right.
That's an important thing. I want my young children, and they're now grown almost, it seems. I've got 16, 17, 18s. And so hopefully they've learned. I pray every night that they don't get involved in this. And so far as I know, they haven't. But you know, you never know.
That's right.
And as a parent, you need to, constantly worried about it. What does a parent do in the community? It's so important that we train the young people. The Bible tells us in Proverbs, if you train up a child in the way he should go, when he is old, he shall not depart from it. I can't help but think that's the front line of defense. The parents, no matter how fragmented the family may be, or no matter how close they may be. You see, This cuts across society, not just the single parent. It's the best family and the best schools and the best churches run into this problem.
Now, there is a drug czar on the national level. Do you think that there should be one on the state level as well?
Well, I think we have to coordinate our efforts in combating the drug problem better. I would like to see somebody responsible. You know, that's one of the things in government we don't get much of is accountability. I was one of the guys that stood up and said, you know, here's what I think we ought to do, and here's the way I think we ought to go. And if you don't want to go that way, then maybe some of them didn't, you understand. But I think it's important we have accountability. You spend hundreds of millions of dollars, you say this is the way I think it should be spent, and then someone has to be responsible for it. And that's fine, that's the way it ought to be. And someone in charge of helping coordinate this. Just the mayor here in Houston acting alone will not solve the problem. You need the mayor, you need the county judge, you need every public official. You need to take constables and sheriffs and police officers. You need to literally build a band of steel around our neighborhoods for protection for those citizens who want to be free from drugs and crime.
Okay, you made reference to crime. And as we look at the crime statistics, crime is up in Houston and in various parts of Texas. Auto theft, rape, robbery, etc. How do we go about dissuading or discouraging those persons from committing those kinds of crimes? Is education the issue or the basis of that as well?
I think you have to have it worked in such a fashion that you touch across the board. Texas has strong laws against those crimes. For violent criminals, we treat them as tough as anybody in the country. And we fill up our prisons. They asked me one time when I was governor if I'd have done a very good job of increasing the laws as far as crime was concerned. I said, well, we fill up the prisons. You know, those people think we've done a good job. I don't think that we're attacking the job on the right level. We've got strong laws. We've got courts that are overloaded right now. We've got prisons that are overcrowded. But it seems that the only real deterrent is not the strong law, not the fast justice, not the long sentence. The only thing that I find that deters much of the criminal activity we have today is the fear of getting caught. How fast you drive when the highway patrol is watching.
Very slowly.
Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If you'll put the highway patrolman behind the billboard, he'll catch almost everybody. You put the highway patrolman on the street, and all at once he looks around and there's nobody speaking.
Yes, that's right.
You put the police officer in the neighborhood, I think you make a difference. If you wait for the crime to occur and say, let's call the police, it's too late for that person. But if you put the police officer out there, now this means more police officers, don't get me wrong, but it also means a safer community. It means a place where people can go and stay out at night, not lock themselves up each evening. And I think that makes some sense. Deter the crime. Deter the crime. Our law officers are overworked. I went out one night here not too many months ago, and we rode through the community. I've never seen anybody work any harder. I had bulletproof vests on. I didn't have mine. I wish I had. It was I asked the guy, you know, when you pull your gun, he says, only when I'm in serious fear of bodily injury or death. I said, mister, I don't believe I'd have a holster. This is a tough job.
That's very serious.
And we owe a great debt of gratitude to these people. They are overworked. There's not enough of them. And we're not putting our resources up front where we really need it.
You know, I think a lot of viewers are particularly interested also in you, the man. And of course, we talked earlier and you mentioned that you were involved in public life for 17 years. Secretary of State, Attorney General, Governor of the state of Texas. You're practicing law now. How was that transition for you from the State House into practicing law again?
Well, let me say that slightly over half the people of Texas wanted me to practice law, so I came back and did that. The transition was one that was difficult in some ways, but not in others. It offered me an opportunity to have a little more stable home life, a little more time with the children, and not having to travel quite as much. It also gave me an opportunity to observe some of these things we're talking about and kind of assess the the progress that I felt that we had made when I was in office and to see from a different angle. And I think this is important. I'd been in government, either of those three offices, for a long period of time. I also now have seen it from the other side and understand the question of paying taxes. I pay a lot of taxes. I want to see some service delivery. You know, I don't mind paying the taxes, I just want something for it. And I think that's fair. We see it in schools, we see it in public education, we see it in our public safety. People, I think, have a right to be afforded product for their tax money, quality. I also see the frustration that people have about coming to grips with these problems, and that's what leadership is. It's taking people who are all totally concerned and say, let's move together in unison and we will overcome this problem. And I think that's the real question that people in political office have to answer. What did you do during a time of crisis? It's pretty easy to be a governor or any other office holder in good times. It's what did you do during the tough times? And I think that hopefully that'll be the standard by which I'll be judged.
As you assess your years in the State House, how would you grade yourself in terms of your
Well, probably a lot higher than my wife would or anyone else, but I think when you consider all the problems that we faced at the time, with one stage of the game, we had a $9 price for oil. Every time oil went down $1 on the market, it cost the state government $100 million, and we were trying to make the advances in education. At the time, we were seeing a shortfall in revenues, and we had a choice. You can either say we're not going to go forward on education, we're going to fall back and wait for better times, or we can say what I thought we should say, and that is we're not going to retreat. We've set our standards high, we're not going to go back now. We've fought too hard to get the educational programs funded and improved to quit. I just don't believe in retreat.
Of course. Tell me this, there are a number of individuals who are concerned. They really want to know, and this is a positive concern that they have, whether or not you are going to run for the governor's position again.
Well, let me say, I have been looking at it very seriously here over the past several weeks. And frankly, 6 months ago, if someone had said that, I would have laughed and said no. I wasn't interested in it at that time, and it didn't feel like that there was any reason to even look at that prospect. But today, I think you see the problems we face, and I sense from calls that I've received from friends around the state that there is an interest in a campaign, and I'm looking at it very seriously. And I wouldn't do it just for the opportunity to serve again, but only for the opportunity to work at the job, to solve problems that we have.
The primary is coming up in March. When do you think you might be ready to announce?
I would guess sometime in the latter part of October, certainly I don't expect to wait past Thanksgiving.
I'm wondering, Governor, is there a particular appeal that you would like to make to our viewers with regards to how to resolve some of the difficulties within their communities, how to work with their children in terms of making sure that they get a quality education, and how to view the person who will be the next governor of the state of Texas? What kinds of decisions, what kinds of thoughts should they
Well, you know, I think that each citizen ought to be viewing the circumstances within which we live as an opportunity to call upon the leadership, whether it be the school superintendent, the school board president, the city hall, county government, to answer their problems. I've got a problem. We have crime in our community. I want you, who asked for leadership opportunities, to solve it. Don't tell me it's too tough for you. We'll get someone tougher. I think people have a right to say, I have a child that I want a quality education, and they're not getting it here. I want a solution. I'm willing to pay the taxes. Let's get the job done. We've got a problem at the state level. Let's ask for an answer. Don't just say, well, I'd like to provide, quote, leadership. Give me some answers. Tell me what you're going to do. How are you going to solve the problem? It's been around for a long time. You've been around for a long time. I've been around for a long time. Surely we've got better answers than to say, well, let's just shuffle the deck, get a few new people up here, and let's see what happens next. They ought to know enough about the job to say, here's how I plan to attack the problem. And that's what I would do if I'm a candidate for that office. I think that people today are looking for answers. They're looking for solutions to problems. and I think they're entitled to them.
Okay. And one final question. This is one that has come up quite often with regards to campaign finance. What are your thoughts about that in about 2 or 3 words?
Well, I think we need to see some reform in campaign finance, and I hope we'll see it as soon as the next session of the legislature. We need to do a better job there.
Better job.
Yeah.
Very good. We thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Margaret.
Indeed.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The Honorable Mark W. White, former governor of Texas. And we thank you also very much for joining us. Plan to join us again next time. Until then, I'm Margaret Ford. Bye-bye.